Hi, just a quick rundown, partly because of my own amnesia, make sure that I can remember how I did this initially. It is a process that goes on, but it's been a long process for me to reach this point, so I thought I would just make a small video for those who might be interested in doing it themselves. It is not necessarily much cheaper to do it yourself, but when you're doing it yourself versus buying the final product, you do have much more control and knowledge as to what quality you end up with. So what I have been doing previously is ethanol extracted oil and what's normally known as RSO, Rick Simpson oil. And the basics about that is that you take all your equipment, you take your butts, you take your glasses and your everything you need to use in the freezer for 24 hours. And then you pull it out, ethanol as well in the freezer, and then you strain it within, usually I spend about 10 minutes to extract it, because I don't want to have anything to get too hot. Once I've extracted it, I go back in the freezer for winterization, and when I take it out of the freezer 24 hours later, I've had all the more solid products in the extraction falling to the bottom, and I can just extract the top bit of it. Then it goes through a distillation process, which is quite lengthy, because for about 100 grams of buds, I will be using about 3 liters of ethanol, isopropyl alcohol 99.99%, and that takes in the distillation process about an hour 10 minutes, depending on the ambient temperature, among other things. And then I'll take reduce it down to about 200 milliliters, and then I will go on my magnetic stirrer, where I'll then reduce the rest of the alcohol until I don't have anything left in it. After that, it'll go in the oven for decarboxylation. Usually the oven is behind me, now it isn't. And decarboxylation happens at about 105 degrees for 40 minutes. That's anyway how I do it. When you're doing that way, you don't have any THCA, you don't have any CBDA, because that disappears in the decarboxylation. You also have a fairly heavily reduction of the quality of the terpenes, because the boiling point of ethanol is at 78 degrees, and so you're spending about 1.5 hours minimum to distill it, because you got 3 liters to get rid of for the same amount that I'm ending up with in this particular glass, but I'll get to that. So that's the ethanol extraction, how I do that. Once that final product has been decarboxylated, I just pull it out in syringes and I'm done. Now I'm doing what they're calling hydrocarbon extraction, and that is also a solvent extraction, but I'm using butane instead. So it's a fair bit more dangerous and tricky. While you have ethanol being flammable, then you definitely got something more potent here when you're working with gas. So what I do is, again, I'll freeze all my gear. I'll freeze my butane extractor here. I'll freeze my box, and then I'll freeze my gas as well. Then I'll powder up my box. I'll stuff it into my tube here, and once it's filled all up and closed off, I'll put that in the freezer for about 24 hours, just to make sure it's all really cold. Then I'll pull vacuum on the tube, and I'll then fill it with gas. The vacuum means it pulls in the gas much more and can contain much more. Once I've done that, in the freezer for about 10-15 minutes to make it soak a little bit, to pull out the cannabinoids and everything you want, the trichomes. And then I'll pull it out and I'll extract it into a mason jar. The mason jar here is because I'm trying to make, or not trying, well in this case it is actually trying to make THCA diamonds or THCA crystals. And this is because when I make those, I can separate the process further down the stream, and it makes for a much better quality. But anyway, what happens is I will extract it into here, it'll be full of gas, and I'll let it by ambient temperature evaporate until a certain level, when I'll then seal it off. Butane evaporates at 0 degrees Celsius, so it has a boiling point. That means I have no degradation of my terpenes doing that. Sealing off the glass, and then within a week you should start seeing crystal forms in the bottom, because the oil crashes and now you have THCA forming in there as crystals or as diamonds, as they say. It takes a week to 4 weeks, depending on how much you want and how big crystals you want, and so on and so forth, if it works. And that's really the trick right now, and that's one of the experiences I'll have to bring on. This one here, the mason jars, I tried out with various other jars, but they were not holding tight. I could hear how the gas was seeping out of them. So I had to experiment a little bit with different versions of mason jars, and I got these here with not the changeable top bit as I usually have, and they seems to hold tight. But out of 4 glass, I only got 2 of them producing crystals for me. So I'm trying now, just putting a little bit more butane, sealing it off, and then I'll give it another week or 2. If it doesn't work, I'll just run it through this next step of the process. Because once this is done, then to separate the diamonds or the crystals from the terpene sauce, from the sugar sauce, I am, let me just turn on my centrifuge here, it's just finished the first round. Open. And here we got terpenes that's been extracted. There's a small bag in here. I don't know if you can see that in the video. I'll just come closer here. So there's a small bag in this video, tube here, and this is the terpene, the sauce that's been extracted from the THCA, which is in here. Now, as you might be able to see, it's still very dark here, meaning we've still got sauce left in the crystals, and I have to have that pulled out. So I'm using a 4,000 rounds per minute, 4,000 RPM machine, and that seems to do the trick very well. Once I've separated those two, then I'll end up with this. This is from a strain called Ice Cream Cake crystals. I hope you can see that. Very nice. This is THCA. And I'll take that and I'll put that in my vacuum chamber, and I'll be purging that for 24 hours. If you are into this and you're an expert on the area, I very much like to know whether it's actually necessary, because when I'm using a centrifuge, I kind of have the feeling that I've already purged it, and there's not so much that these crystals can have butane trapped in it. So for now, it's just to be safe rather than sorry. I'll take then the sauce and I'll dilute that in alcohol, isopropyl 99.99% alcohol, and I'll winterize it. Now, what is winterization? Well, winterization is when you have the substance diluted, then you put it in the freezer for like 24 hours at least. And if you have extracted anything that is a little bit more heavy, unwanted ingredients, like for instance waxes, then those will drop to the bottom and you'll end up with something that is much more clean. So, and if you are looking at these two here, let's just go closer to the camera. See this here? I don't know how that comes out, but we'll try. This is from the same batch. What I did was just I pulled out the top bit of it, and then I took the rest and pulled it to this little glass here, and I'll do another 24-hour winterization before I do a 200 micron filtration. But right now I'm in the process of distilling it. And the distillation happens on my magnetic stirrer here, which is heated, and that's a different story. So if you're comparing to the ethanol extraction, where I'm spending about 3 liters of ethanol to extract about 10-15 grams of final product, then as I mentioned before, the distillation process is about 1.5 hours, and it hurts the terpenes a lot. Now, obviously, I can avoid hurting the terpenes a bit here as well, but I'm starting out with about 60 milliliters when I'm when I'm winterizing this. And that's all I have to extract. So we are talking way less time. We take way less hurt of the terpenes. So I'm really looking forward to see how this is coming out. This was an experiment because I still got the Ice Cream Cake strain ethanol extracted in my freezer or refrigerator. So I want to make a comparison to see what is the different taste in the two products when it's been either ethanol extracted or hydrocarbon extracted. So once this has been reduced down to only being the oil without having any ethanol in it, this has already been purged from butane at that point, because that happens in this process as well. Because like I said, the boiling point for butane is 0 degrees, so it will not survive in there. So I don't need the vacuum purge to do that. Once I've done that, then I'll just store it as it is, label it, but in the future I can then mix it in as I want it. I can choose to make an oil that has the ingredients of a certain strain, but has the flavor of the ice cream cake, and I can mix those two up. There'll still be a little bit of THCA and a little bit of all the other things in there, but it's primarily a matter of taste. And I can take my THCA and I can decide to what degree do I want it to be activated, psychoactive or not. And all of these A's and without A's has got anti-cancer properties, and that's what I'm looking for. So that is, in all its simplicity, how I'm making my oils right now. The next thing is obviously, because these are high THC strains, so that's why you make crystals. I'm still trying to figure out what happens if I'm making CBD. I kind of have the feeling that you don't have the crash, you can't make CBD crystals, but I don't know. And it's very, very difficult to obtain information on it because everybody is so focused on being high. I'm focused on the medicinal properties. So if you know anything about that, let me know. But I will try to experiment with it the next few days, and then I'll see if I can pull some diamonds out of it or crystals out of it. But given the fact that I have got a 50% success rate with something with high THC that should be making crystals, it's very hard to say whether a failure is actually a failure unless I do it a lot of times. So we will see what happens there, but I really like it to be the case. I would love if I can have a separation of THCA and CBDA and then continue the process with all the products the same way. But if I cannot do that, then all I will do, like I will do with this one, if it does not crystallize, I will just do a ventorization to make sure I have it purged from butane, and then I'll do a distillation, and I'll just store it as a regular non-decarb oil with a high profile of terpenes. Anyway, very short video, I hope. That's how I do it. Until next time, stay happy and healthy.